Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that I'm not at the AXA Training Centre as I usually am for these pre-match press conferences, but I do have a 2-year-old, and sometimes life kind of gets in the way, so unfortunately wasn't able to make it down there this morning. But I did watch Arne Slot's pre-match press conference ahead of that game against Tottenham in the Carabao Cup, the second leg of that tie, of course, with Liverpool being 1-0 down on aggregate coming into it. And I like to think I'd still be able to give a decent summary, even though I wasn't there today. So I'm going to give it a go, and I'll start as I always do with the team news. Of course, the key question coming into this one was, how is Trent Alexander-Arnold? He limped off in the game against Bournemouth in the weekend, that big win for Liverpool, and it's all been about, how is he looking? Is this going to be a long-term issue? Is it going to be a short one? So thankfully we have had an update from the manager today, and I would say on the whole this is a positive update. Of course, when a player leaves the pitch with a muscle injury, you'd never know about the severity of it, really, do you? And so I think that this is positive news in that the manager said, yes, he's going to miss the Tottenham game, unfortunately, but he said after that we kind of have to see. So of course, the game that comes after that is the game against Plymouth Argyle in the FA Cup, so there'll be no rush to get him back for that one, I'd say. But then it's the Merseyside derby after that against Everton, and it made it sound, from what the manager is saying, that maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold has a good chance of featuring in that one. I say that because the manager revealed that he's already on the pitch doing rehab work with the rehabilitation coaches, which I think is hugely positive news. So the muscle issue, you'd usually have to wait a little bit longer than that to get him back in. So it seems like they caught it very early in the Bournemouth game. He's not going to be out for too long. Yes, it's a blow. He misses Tottenham, but we could even maybe see him in that FA Cup game, getting minutes, and then, of course, then be back for the derby, which, of course, would be a huge boost. And it chimes with the reporting that we've seen around this. Paul Joyce reporting yesterday that it looks like Trent is probably going to be aiming to be back for the derby. So as I say, I think that's really good news, and it's all about deciding then, can he make the weekend? Does he need a couple of minutes just to keep him in rhythm? We'll have to see what the manager decides on that. But as I say, I think that's overall positive news, because when you get a muscle injury, it could be much, much worse than this, really, than it's ended up being. So I think that's a boost for Liverpool. Now, in terms of other team news, usually I have to list off names, and certainly last season I was doing these injury updates from press conferences, and sometimes it'd be 8 injury updates, 9 injury updates. Nothing of the like this season. It's absolutely incredible, the transformation, really, and the change in Liverpool's fortunes, because there are no other injuries, and I will keep banging on about this. The contrast to last season is just absolutely massive in terms of what that's worth to Liverpool. I think it's going to end up being worth a few points in the Premier League title race, and potentially a couple of trophies as well, because obviously Liverpool are fighting on 4 fronts. I think having this many options available and having a fully fit squad to be able to rotate through this really, really difficult fixture backlog that Liverpool always end up with when they go deep in 4 competitions, it's just absolutely massive for the manager. Of course, if there is one slight downside for Arne Slot, it's that it gives him tough decisions to make around the composition of the squad, not just in terms of the starting 11, which of course is the biggest decision you have to make, but also in terms of who he leaves out the squad. I mean, we saw at Bournemouth at the weekend that both Federico Chiesa and Joe Gomez were fully fit, and yet they didn't even make the squad because there just wasn't enough space for them to fit into that squad. And it's an incredible decision to have to make. It's a fortuitous position to be in, but obviously it's really, really tricky for the manager. And he was actually really, really interesting on this when asked about it in the press conference, and said that he can't really understand why the squad sizes in the Premier League that you can name on a match day aren't a little bit bigger. Of course, we get that in the Champions League, don't we, at the moment, where you can name a 23-man squad, which is obviously your 11 players and then 12 substitutes. And it's actually, interestingly, it's the same in the Eredivisie in Holland. You get to name 12 substitutes in that competition as well. And yet Arne Slot has come here to the Premier League, and he can't really understand why it's 9 substitutes, particularly as in this country we also have, not just the National Cup, the FA Cup, but also 38 games, which is more than the Eredivisie has. Also the League Cup on top of that. And of course there's been those extra 2 Champions League fixtures coming in as well. So he couldn't really get his head around why you only get 9 substitutes in Premier League competition. And he says that makes it really, really difficult for him when you've had a good week in training, everybody's working hard to make sure that they secure their place in the squad, and yet you've got to tell one or two of them that they're not going to make the cut. He says that's a really, really difficult conversation to have, and it's one that he's going to have this week. Of course, Trent Alexander-Arnold means that one of Gomez or Chiesa can come back into the squad, but maybe one of those two, or someone who was in the squad against Bournemouth, is going to have to be left out. And that is, like I say, a really, really tricky conversation. Maybe that's something for the Premier League to look at with the fixtures, the way they are in this country, the amount of games that you play, particularly for the bigger teams and teams like Liverpool who are going in all 4 competitions. Could they extend that from 9 subs to 12? That's a change we're going to see coming in soon. We'll have to see, but obviously Arne Slot has expressed his concern about that. He doesn't want to be in a position where he's leaving somebody out after a good week of training, and we'll see who that unlucky person is when this game comes around tomorrow. Now, one person we know will be in the squad and will be in the starting 11, I would imagine, is Conor Bradley. Of course, he will benefit from the fact that Trent Alexander-Arnold is going to miss this game by coming in. I thought, again, this is something that Slot was kind of interesting on in terms of talking about Conor Bradley. Obviously said he played this first leg against Spurs, didn't he, and put in a decent performance, and he's full of praise for him, but he was also quite critical of one of his recent performances against PSV Eindhoven. Said that we spoke to him about one slight error that he made in that game that led to a goal, in that he wasn't aggressive enough in getting out to the overlap to stop that happening, which happened for one of the goals. You may remember, I think it's the one that ends up being fired into the roof of the net. It is a great finish, but Slot felt that Conor Bradley could have done a little bit more in that situation to stop the shot being, getting the shot away, getting the shot away in that situation. And I thought it was really interesting that kind of is really reflective of what I'm hearing about Arne Slot and what he's like around the training ground, in terms of he's so obsessed with trying to get improvement from his players and talking to them, and he's big on the details. They do a lot of post-match meetings and speak about areas that players can improve in, and this is just one where, again, it was an underarm question really, that he could have just praised Bradley and bigged him up, but he spoke about areas he wants him to improve as well. And as I say, that's really kind of testament to Slot's attitude in general and what he's like with the players, and it's certainly that attitude seems to be working. Now, one of the team selection issue I want to just talk about as well before I wrap up on that is what's going to happen in goal. And very much Slot was keeping his cards close to his chest, as he has done on this issue actually in the past. He was asked about, obviously, Queevy and Kelleher. This has been his competition generally, but we did see Alisson Becker, didn't we, in the first leg at Tottenham? So he was asked, what are you going to do this time around? Are you going to see Kelleher again? And again, he said, look, I've not told either of the players yet. So before I speak about this, I really want to go and tell them who's starting so that they know. So he's really, really being a bit cagey about it. But it's an interesting one because it's fallen similarly to the first leg in that an FA Cup game immediately follows it. So for me, I think the suggestion there would be that Kelleher again gets the FA Cup game. And again, we see Alisson Becker as part of what should be Liverpool's strongest team coming in for this one. That would be my kind of expectation really, because I think there's no reason to give Kelleher back-to-back games. I think you want to go as strong as possible in this game because you can give all your players the weekend off as well. So that would be my expectation. But as I say, Slot very much playing his cards close to his chest. Now, just want to wrap up as well by speaking about another interesting one really from the press conference, which is on a totally different subject, of course, the transfer window. Now that did close, didn't it, with Liverpool hadn't signed anyone, let a couple leave on loan, a couple leave on permanent, just younger players. And he was asked, are you kind of happy with how that played out? Did you want to add anything? And I thought, again, he was really, really good in terms of his answer on this. I've got a direct quote from him here. He said, there are not many managers have a squad as good as I have. The league table shows the trust we have in them was correct. So very much a manager who's happy with what's happened in that transfer window. Wasn't kind of, I've seen a lot of theories on social media that he was banging down Richard Hughes' door and asking for players, and that he was being denied it by FSG. But it's not just what he said in that press conference, because of course he could lie if he wanted to, but it's very much the feeling I get from speaking to people around Liverpool that he's very, very happy to go with what he has until the end of the season. I think he backed that up with his words today, and as he says, look at the league table, not just in the Premier League but the Champions League. Look at the position Liverpool are in. He feels that he's got everything he needs to get Liverpool over the line in terms of winning trophies, and then when the summer comes around. He can make a few tweaks, stamp his own mark on the squad, but he's very much happy to wait until then to do that. Now, if you do want to learn a little bit more about what that summer might look like, a couple of players they maybe would look at, what positions they're looking at, please do check out my Substack. I know I've got a few new subscribers on YouTube who may not know about this. davidlynchlfc.co.uk. Appreciate anyone who goes over and has a look at that, because that is kind of my lifeblood. If you can support that, it really helps me to do everything in terms of my journalism and covering Liverpool. So the link to that, davidlynchlfc.co.uk, is in the description below. So do, or just type it in yourselves if you want to. But I do appreciate everyone who has a look at the Substack. And as I say, there's a piece on there. We'll tell you a little bit more about what the summer is going to look like for Liverpool. So I'm going to leave it there anyway. Very much looking forward to this game. It's a chance for Liverpool to book a trip to Wembley. Arne Slot to get there in his very first season in charge, and of course a chance to win a trophy. So absolutely massive. So I'm looking forward to getting back to Anfield to see if Liverpool can turn this around, because of course they are 1-0 down when this game starts, but I've got every faith that they can turn this around in front of I'm sure it's going to be a very passionate Anfield crowd. So if you want to make sure you catch my post-match review from Anfield tomorrow, do make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you can drop me a like, I'm always massively appreciative of that. And of course, do let me know in the comments how you're feeling about this game, how you're feeling about the team news, what your team would look like for this one. Always interested to hear that. And I'll see you guys at Anfield tomorrow.